Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today I'm going to be attempting Bon Appétit's strawberry snacking cake. So I was unaware that I needed a special cake for snacking. I've always kind of thought that, if I put my mind to it, any cake can be a snacking cake. But what about you? Are you like me and you'll eat any cake, anytime, any place? Or have you been waiting for a special snacking cake? Let me know in the comments down below. But anyhow, summer strawberries are looking so fresh right now, so I am super excited to try this recipe out today. I do these Bon Appetit recipe tests every Wednesday, so if you like this one, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Without any further ado, let's see how this goes. As always, I'll leave a link to the recipe and the ingredient quantities in the description box below. Since strawberries are the main flavor in this recipe, you want to get the best, freshest summer strawberries that you can find, and then you want to rinse them very well. So I've talked about my vegetable wash in the past, but look at the results here. I mean, there's just so much grit and grime coming off of them, so that's why I never rinse with just plain water. Now, when it comes to slicing the berries, you want to slice these thinly per the recipe. However, there was no guidance on what that means precisely. Reading the reviews of this recipe, people were really struggling with this. Their strawberries were either sinking to the bottom or just sitting on the surface of the cake. So you want them to recess ever so slightly during the baking process. So I sliced these to a ½ centimeter, and the strawberries sat on the surface of the cake but recessed just slightly during the baking process, which is ideal. Once the strawberries are sliced, you're just going to toss them with some sugar and salt, and this process is called maceration. So really it's just kind of drawing some of the excess liquid out of the berry, along with giving a little bit more sweetness and flavoring to the fruit. So you're just going to stir this off and on while you prepare the rest of the cake, but it's pretty low maintenance. So the recipe calls for a 9x13 pan. It did not specify whether glass or metal. However, based on the picture on the BA website, it looks like they were using a metal cake pan. So you can use glass, that's completely fine. You do just need to drop the baking temperature by 25 degrees. So using a little bit of olive oil and some parchment paper, I'm just setting myself up for a nice easy release when the cake is done baking. So you want to be sure to leave a couple inches overhang because you're going to need to lift this parchment out using the little handles. So probably 3 or 4 inches would be sufficient here. Once you've got the pan and parchment paper thoroughly coated with olive oil, you just want to dust the inside with some granulated sugar. And really what this is doing is giving you some sugar that's going to caramelize on the outside and get that nice crispiness during the baking process. So this technique is very similar to what I did in the sesame tahini cake that Claire made. In that recipe we use sesame seeds and sugar, here we're using just sugar. So whenever I make a BA recipe, I always convert the volume measurements into grams because I know a lot of you prefer to bake in grams just like I do. So in this recipe in particular, BA did provide gram weights for both the AP flour and for the cornmeal. Just like in Chris Morocco's chocolate chip cookie video, I found that the gram weights provided by BA were slightly below the weights that I measured myself. So for the cornmeal, it was pretty close. However, for the flour, it was about a ¼ cup difference. My cake turned out just fine, so it may not make too much of a difference. So next I'm just portioning out the wet ingredients. Whenever I've got a recipe calling for egg yolks, I always save my whites in a container in the refrigerator. They keep good for at least a week, and you can make scrambled eggs, omelets, meringues, whatever you need on the weekend. I just really hate wasting food, so definitely save your whites and use them for later. Once you've got all those wet ingredients measured out, you're just going to get this whisked together to get everything evenly incorporated. We're then adding the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients, and the recipe said to gently whisk this together. So I don't know what a gentle whisk looks like, so I just tried to move a little bit slowly and not overwork the batter. Now that we've combined the wet and the dry ingredients, overworking is going to result in gluten formation, which will result in a tougher cake. So we've got 3/4 cup of olive oil that we need to fold into this mixture. Since we're streaming and stirring at the same time, I'm trying this kitchen towel technique from one of my subscribers, and it worked perfectly. Having the towel around the base really stopped the bowl from dancing away from me. Now folding all of this oil into the cake batter was a little bit challenging. I found that if you elevate one side of the bowl to allow the oil to pool to the opposing side, it incorporated a little bit more quickly than having the bowl flat. Once there are no more streaks of oil, you just want to pour this into your prepared baking dish, and then we can start with the decoration process. So when adding the jelly to the top of the cake, there's really no rule here. The one thing that I noticed is that the blobs of jelly that touched the edge of the pan ended up kind of seeping around the edge of the cake and just sitting on the bottom. So try to keep the blobs of jelly from touching the edge of the cake, but aside from that, you're okay. When swirling this, you want to use something that has a little bit of heft to it. I used just a table knife. So you can see that as the strawberries sat, they did release a pretty good amount of juice. So now I'm just adding the strawberries to the top of the cake in rows. And you want to butt the strawberries up directly against each other so the wide part of the strawberry is touching all the way across the pan. I wasn't sure how many rows I was going to be able to get, so I started in the middle and then worked my way from the outside in just to make sure that it was as symmetrical as possible. This process was a little time consuming, having to put the strawberries down one at a time. And I did find that I had a few strawberries left over, and I had some strawberries that had broken apart during the mixing process. So when you're tossing the strawberries, try to be a little bit gentle with them. Now, one thing to note here is if you're baking in a glass pan, you do need to reduce the temperature by 25 degrees. So I baked this at 325 for 45 minutes, and my cake was fully cooked. A toothpick came out clean, but I didn't get the golden brown color on the top like Bon Appetit had in their cake. The cake has been cooling at room temperature for about an hour now, so it's pretty much room temperature at this point. And this is what it looks like. So you can see I've got on this slice a berry on the top. I've got a berry that kind of sank a little bit. There's some of the jelly that's marbled through on the bottom and a little bit on the side as well. So overall, this piece has kind of got everything going on. So let's see how it tastes. It's nice and light and fluffy. It's not overly sweet. It's got a fantastic texture from that cornmeal where it's just a little bit gritty. You don't taste the olive oil really, except for maybe there's a little bit of savoriness going on here, but this doesn't have an olive oily taste. So I like that. So overall, I am definitely happy with this strawberry snacking cake, and this will be something that's in my rotation for the summer. So I really hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.